Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the reboot of Experts on the Wire. I'm super excited to have my guest today, Luca Cian, with me. I remember a time in SEO when the conversations used to be about how do we help and understand people. But now with the rise of AI and the opportunity, to publish 10,000 blog posts in a week, it seems like we're going in the opposite direction. So when I learned that my guest today decodes how humans interact with AI and what it means for business, I knew I wanted to learn more. Finally, I don't have a sponsor yet. I will be looking, but for now, I'll plug myself. So if you are looking for SEO or AI SEO consulting, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Dan Shore, S-H-U-R-E, or email dan@evolvingseo.com. So my guest today, like I said, is Luca Cian. Luca, how are you?
Great. Thank you for hosting me today. I'm
Absolutely.
excited.
So you're a full professor at Darden School of Business. Your expertise is in visual persuasion, psychological response to AI, social identity, consumer psychology. And when I reached out to you, I actually didn't realize that you also advise the U.S. Department of Homeland Security on AI strategy. So I'll ask a little bit about that as well. But I first wanted to begin with asking, how did you see this AI thing coming? Because I noticed your first article cited in Google Scholar was from 2020, the one about
Right.
Word of Machine. And that was like 2 or 3 years before ChatGPT and all the LLMs and everything. So how did you initially see this AI thing happening and get into that?
Well, that's a good question. So first of all, my background is in psychology. So my PhD is in social psychology, and then I transitioned to marketing. Although marketing was always an interest of mine. So my master was in marketing, and then I did a postdoc in marketing, and so I always try to connect these two worlds, marketing and psychology. So I was always interested in understanding how people react psychologically to certain things. So at the beginning of my career, I was doing a lot of research on what I would call visual persuasion, like advertising, imagery, etc., etc. But then I actually was working with a co-author of mine, whose name is Chiara, and then we were thinking, okay, I feel that there is something going on here with what will be AI, and at that time, ChatGPT, when we started working, was not even released to the public. And actually, I remember my very first paper was with an academic preview of ChatGPT before it was even released to the public, where we were studying in an hypothetical future, if newspapers were to use AI to write articles, would people trust them or not? And I remember that when I was presenting this work, people were always asking me, oh, come on, this will never happen. People will always recognize something that an AI writes versus what a human writes, and but at the end of the day, everything changed so quickly that although that, seems like 1,000 years ago, was actually 7 years ago.
It
But
reminds
that,
me of the video of Will Smith eating a pizza. Do you remember that? Like the first one where he looks really weird and odd and
right.
like, no way this AI thing is going to do real video. And then here we are.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So to answer to your question, always been interested in psychological reactions to things, and then always fascinated with technology. And so when we saw this big new thing in technology coming, we jumped right in. So that was, and then since then I was, really interested in studying more because it's such an evolving field, and that makes it very interesting, but also very hard because, usually you study phenomenon things that are pretty stable, but this thing is always changing, right? And so how people react to a changing target is always a little bit more difficult to study.
That's fascinating. And I want to dig a lot more into the psychological response to AI and do humans trust it and things like that. But just as a quick aside, I'm so curious to know what your advising is with the DHS. Is it part of the SAGE program?
Right. It's part of the SAGE program. So the DHS, and this is totally apolitical, but basically the DHS has some expert, and this is the SAGE program that NEI and then that they want to consult when there is some particular important issue. So it's
Like
an
an
advisory
ambassador?
role. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
so is that something where do you meet with people on a regular basis, or do they reach out when they have like
no.
something they need to talk to you about?
The latter. So they reach out when there is something
Yeah.
important to discuss. It's not a
Yeah.
paid role, so not making money out of it, but
Yeah.
I thought was interesting.
Oh, what a great experience. That sounds
Right.
very interesting. So let's dig into psychological response to AI. I first just want to unpack this a little bit with some definitions. So when we're referring to AI in your expertise in your work and how humans are reacting to it, are we talking about, LLMs, generative AI? Are we talking about agent? Like, let's define AI for the context of that.
My God, that's such a great question, and I will try to be, pretty short in my answers, but so please stop me if you see that I am going on and on and on.
Yeah.
But let's say this is although it seems a pretty straightforward question, is actually a very fascinating question, because at least in our research, and when I say our, I mean psychology research, consumer psychology research, marketing research, not engineering research, there is a very a pretty generic confusion. What is AI?
Right.
We can call it automated, back in the day, and when back in the day, I mean 2022, we were calling it automated system. Then now today you can call it agentic AI. You can call it AI. You can call it large language models. You can call it in many, many different ways. Now,
Okay.
the problem is that if you are an engineer, you'll say, okay, but this refers to very different things. And that's right. However, that's not clear that in generic public that are perceived as completely different things. There is this sort of cloud of what AI is. And that's important for a couple of things. I study people perception, so I care a little bit less about what's the definition from an engineering point of view. But what I care more is what a psychological definition, like what we define AI. In our research, we found that people, are pretty confused most of the time. So many times you call LLM AI, generative AI, like, is all AI. So we don't find, I never, at least in my research, I never found huge difference when I change labels. Now,
Interesting.
There are some studies, what in between nerds we call meta-analysis, like when you study a lot of papers and then you put together all their data to see if, analyzing the data that 1,000 papers, 1,000 academic articles did, is there a difference if you use one label, say, automated system versus AI? And probably there is. But in my research, has been always quite minor, and so that's interesting as well. And indeed, in a project we are starting together right now, I have something with some co-authors right now, is very at the beginning, is very interested in what people perceive AI to be. Like, because if you think about Siri, 7 years ago, you would never call it AI, but now Siri is AI, right? And so in the mind of the lay person, when a technology starts to be defined as AI, and that's very important, because many people, it doesn't matter what technically is AI versus not, but matters when people interpret something as AI versus not, and that also has legal implications, right?
It's fascinating because I think that probably a lot of people don't even know when they're using AI sometimes. Like you mentioned Siri. And I see a lot of companies just slapping AI on a tool or something they had all along. Like I believe there was a time when Google's natural language processing API, like if you go into their landing page, now it says AI, like natural language AI API or
Mhm.
whatever, but I don't think it ever used to say that. And so that's another example of that. Um, how do you think consumers are defining AI or perceiving AI to be is in the mind? Because I'm trying to get outside of the SEO bubble, right? In the SEO bubble, we're all ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and Gemini, and we're so focused on thinking that the whole population has used ChatGPT or they know about it. But if you're thinking about just regular people, what do they think? What do most of them think AI is, and do they even think ChatGPT?
Right, that's a great question, and I wish we are starting this research right now, so I don't have
Oh, interesting.
data to tell you, but yeah, it's a fascinating question. We don't know right now what people define AI is, like, because if you think
Yeah.
about, uh, I think right now, but these are wild guesses, is also every technology after 2020, right? After ChatGPT 3 was released to the public. Clearly, again, if an engineer is listening to us say, oh my God, this is so wrong. But doesn't matter what's wrong from an engineering point of view, at least for me, is how people perceive AI, right? So if something feels old, most probably people say, oh, probably was not AI, it was, before COVID. I also think if something is generative, usually people think is more AI.
Hmm.
What I think is also interesting is that I would like to explore more is the body effect, right? A robot many times use AI, but robots were in existence much before this, a ChatGPT thing. So is actually a robot perceived as more AI, less AI, because the most time we interact is something without a robotic interface, right? But of course, there are many robots. That's Amazon. Uh, all the Tesla future research is based on AI um,
Yeah.
robotics. So, that's also another dimension that is interesting to explore, and we are exploring right now. But yeah,
So
it's an interesting question.
one thing you've studied a lot is if people trust AI. So in your research and study, when consumers know they're using AI, like something generative,
Mm.
how do you test or measure, and what's your learnings about if they trust like information that's being provided by a ChatGPT or a Google Gemini? Is there any good research around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and that's I think the main point that in my research is that right now the whole world is pushing, and all businesses, marketing businesses as well, all companies. Every time I talk with a CMO or someone in the C-suite in a company, they were telling me we have to push on AI. We have to push on AI,
Yeah.
but uh, no one really knows what AI is or why. But because Walmart is doing, then if I'm another big business, then I have to do it as well.
Hmm.
And the question is that there is a lot of push in terms of advancing AI from a technological point of view, and that's great. Of course, we can see. I mean, it could be scary. That's another, but of course, that's very important from the development of AI. What is missing is study the psychology part of it, meaning you can have the best AI system, but if people don't trust it, then is money lost, right?
Right.
Is like tears in the rain, to quote Blade Runner, right? So
Yeah.
it's not really something relevant. And so what we found in my research together with my co-authors is that it's not it's a binary thing, like people either trust AI or not trust AI. Um, we found that people trust AI sometimes for some tasks, and people don't trust AI for other tasks. And I'm happy to, you know, tell you more about the research I did on which task in which tasks people trust more or less AI. But the main message is that, like clearly there is a psychological side. People need to trust AI, especially right now with agentic AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem, right? So one thing is to trust a recommendation, and one thing is to trust an agent doing things instead of me. And if there
Right.
is no trust, the technology is not flying.
That's right. So I do want to dig into that. I do want to ask first, what are the biggest, can we subdivide the biggest friction points for consumers when it comes to trusting AI? Is it UX? Is it the actual accuracy of the information they're getting back? Is it privacy even? Is it the fear of mistakes that it's making, or just the branding and perception of AI? Like, are there different areas that
Yeah,
are causing friction for consumers to not be trusting it?
yeah, that's a great point. There are many. There are many barriers to trust, for sure. You know, all the ones that you mentioned, privacy, etc., etc. But in addition to what you mentioned, I would add the typology of task, something that I'm happy to talk about later. Like sometimes people are happy to trust AI on some tasks, but not on others. So the typology itself, mistakes. So another thing is we are much more forgiving when a person makes a mistake versus an AI, because we think people
Mhm.
learn versus we're not really thinking that AI can learn. That's not true again, but it may change in the future. Uh, but that's at the lay belief at the present moment. Another thing is what I call or in literature is called the black box effect, meaning
Mm.
right now I'm thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure I understand what's going on in Dan's mind, but
Yeah.
actually I have no idea what you're thinking. Or maybe think, who is this crazy guy, right? Who knows? Who knows what you're thinking? But we have assumptions as humans that we understand sort of what other people do. But we know that we have no idea what's going on behind uh, um, you know, an AI. And
Mhm.
so that's another friction right there. So it's much scarier when you interact with something that you have no idea what's going on behind the black box, right? And so then there are things that we can do to help with this friction, but that's another big friction, the fear of a black box. And another friction that I studied, and there is also a lot of study in the literature, is about customization. Meaning, if you think about, I think, oh, I'm very special, or then probably you think you're very, every one of us thinks he's very special, although most of the time we're pretty average, but, we think we're very special. And because of that, we think that a human, for example, a doctor, a human doctor can understand my uniqueness, but an AI cannot really understand my uniqueness, because an AI can maybe understand averages,
Mhm.
but not my personal uniqueness. Again, is this real? True? No, an AI is perfectly able to understand my uniqueness, but what I study is these lay beliefs, these biases, if you wish, in people's mind, and people think, oh, on average, maybe AI is good for, you know, my friend over there because he's pretty average, but not for me, that I'm so
Yes.
unique. Would never be able to understand my skin complexion problems, my unique health situation. And so we don't trust usually AI when we think about something highly customized or something unique to my personality.
I think there's
So
also, like, you can have a moment of using AI. Like, I can prompt Claude, which I've been using a little bit for something, but then when I try to apply the advice, quote unquote, that Claude has given me, and it doesn't feel right, or I'm not getting the result that I was hoping for, now I have a negative association with that tool. I was asking Claude for some advice on my website, and then I tried applying it, and I went and read it back like a week later. I'm like, this sounds really generic, and I wouldn't say it this way. And so I went and changed everything, right? So that's one personal experience of mine. How do you actually, when you're doing your research, how do you do a study to understand how people are responding to AI? Are there certain tests, or like how does that work? And I think I'm also thinking about how this is beneficial to SEOs, because as I said at the beginning, we've all lost sight, I think, at trying to understand people. And we're
I
all
agree.
just like throwing up hundreds of blog posts and using all these tools, and like no one's thinking about the humans. So what do you do in your studies to understand how humans are reacting? What does that look like?
I'm by training experimentalist, meaning I do a lot of experiments. That is a lot of A/B testing, right? So something that every people, everyone that every marketer can do. So basically, we start with some hypothesis. We think, okay, based on what we know, I think, what could be. And so we expose people to different version of ChatGPT, or to different
Mm,
prompts, or certain outputs. And then we measure things like how much would you trust it? We measure things that we hypothesize could change. And then in academia, we have to run to thousands of people, dozens of experiments. So it's really, that's sometimes what's the biggest difference in business. Sometimes you want something that could be a little bit less precise but faster. In
yeah,
academia, we are more about precision and not, um, you know,
it's very
um,
rigorous.
yeah, yeah,
How do
yeah,
you
pretty
set
rigorous,
up a,
but time could require a lot of time, right? So,
yeah.
our experiments, but I have projects with big data as well.
Hmm.
But right now it's we are doing a project trying to understand, for example, how different models like Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, etc., are reacting to the same prompt, right? So
Yeah.
this is not a clean experiment, but like things like that. But the main idea, we run experiments and we see how people react.
Yeah. Do you have any early findings from that, or just hunches or anything from the
Yeah,
different?
uh, yeah, it's very interesting because, and that's I think could actually speak to your audience. Although again, maybe I cannot say too much because it's still in a
Yeah.
developing side of research. But what we found is that everyone right now say, oh, we have to optimize for people, and then we have to optimize for um, large language models. But what we found is that every one of them has different personalities, and that's not big news. But what is a big news for us was that the same query was returning very different results
Hmm.
from ChatGPT, different brands. Like if you said, give me some brand, give me the same, what's the best running shoe? And Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini return different brands. Of course, there are some commonalities, but
Hmm.
less than what we thought personally. And
Yeah.
so that was very interesting because that means that maybe in the future, we're not creating content for all LLMs, but we need to create content for maybe, hey, I'm developing this content for Claude or
Yeah.
for Gemini, very specific because they all, respond differently to the same query. So that's, I think, is fascinating.
Yeah. Maybe it ends up being like social media, right? Like Gen Z's on TikTok, businesses on LinkedIn. Have you seen any patterns? Is it like I've noticed Claude is a little more like understands soft subjects in my perception a little bit more. I always go to Gemini for coding, or like how do you
Hmm.
do this technical thing? That's what I find myself doing. And then I just go to ChatGPT for general things, is just my habitual usage. Have you seen any patterns in the types of responses from each of those at this point?
Um, Yes, in terms of some are more verbose than others, some
Hmm.
are more also in the way they present results, some are more moderate, like say, oh, there are pros but and cons, while some more reviews are great about these brands, and uh and so that's interesting because um this is something where we found that ChatGPT is getting a little bit behind
Yeah.
compared to Gemini and Claude. I agree, especially for what right now, at least for questions that are less about brands but more about understanding some soft skills. For those query, we found that usually Claude is much more
Yeah.
informative.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, yeah, is a little bit too. Try to don't see is very generic,
Yeah.
and then Gemini tend to be very very short, straight to the point.
Hmm.
But sometimes misses the nuances.
Yeah.
So they're all developing their own personalities. They're all good for something. It's not that, as
Hmm.
you said, like. Uh, but and the funny thing is that if we were having this chat 1 year ago, Gemini would be probably be the last place. So in 1 year, I think Gemini did an incredible work. But so who knows, maybe ChatGPT will be able to catch up again, but right now and you can see also the distinction. I think Claude is much more B2B, so for generation of images, something like that, it
Oh.
sucks. But because most of the time you don't generate images if you use Claude for businesses, right? So that's
Hmm.
where their target is. Where I think ChatGPT is now thinking much more on B2C. I want to be in everyone's phone,
Right.
and so generate videos, generate images. That's something I really want. Grok is more about social media, so if you're on X, of course, everything is on Grok, and then also politically speaking, right? So
Yes.
a lot of people think that, or some people, I never did any test in terms of political issues, so I cannot comment on that. But some of these, some people find these models to be um, oriented towards the left,
Yeah.
while Grok, some people say is more neutral, some people say is no, actually is much more conservative. So I cannot comment on that. I don't know, but for sure one thing is clear is that some political difference, for sure, at least from Grok and other models. Especially, I think um, um, Claude, because Claude has more guard rates in general compared
Hmm.
to Gemini and ChatGPT.
So in a moment, I want to talk a little bit about how businesses can use this information. It goes all the way back to your description of what you do. You decode how humans interact with AI and then what it means for business strategy. But just one last question before we get to that. Let's say you're running an A/B test with different prompts in ChatGPT, as you mentioned. How do you actually run that? I'm just very curious from sort of maybe a technical-ish perspective or just logistical perspective. What does that kind of test look like?
Great question. So it can go in very different way. From a more simplistic point of view, where, hey, dear user, imagine that you're using this chat and you
Yeah.
you input this and this is the results. That's very not very realistic. From more realistic views, many times in academia we use a software called Qualtrics, and we are developing in academia, but is available also if you look online, codes that integrate um, Qualtrics with
Mm.
ChatGPT. So basically, you ask people, okay, enter in these chat and now write these, have 10 of rounds with ChatGPT, right? So people will use ChatGPT directly from Qualtrics. So that's more realistic.
And
It's
that's
always a trade.
Qualtrics.
Yes, correct.
Qualtrics. Yeah, I've seen this site before, qualtrics.com. Oh, cool. So this integrates
Yeah.
with ChatGPT.
Right. It's not a service that Qualtrics offers necessarily, but it's something that we did in academia. So,
Oh,
and it's publicly available so that you can integrate these things so you can have people interact directly with ChatGPT. And that acquires more what we would call, external validity, meaning it's more real because actually it's ChatGPT, but because
Mhm.
we don't know what happened behind ChatGPT, as
Yeah.
academics, sometimes we know I want to give something very clean, because I don't know
Mhm.
what ChatGPT will answer. And then a third version of it, we create, we're running some project with that, some sort of proprietary or very slim LLMs based on open code, Llama, Grok, where we ask people to interact with those things, and then we can control really a lot of things over there but of course, are much less powerful because
Yeah.
you cannot run. Could be only very specific. It cannot be massive.
Do you incorporate
Um,
the like eye tracking, or maybe is it biometrics work with that sort of testing? Because you said they could self-report, like run version A, version B. Do you trust this one more than that one type of thing?
yeah.
But do you
Well,
gather other data?
I, not everyone does. I did a lot of research with eye tracking and what we call biofeedback, meaning, as you
Yeah.
say, eye tracking. Then sometimes we measure something called galvanic skin response. That is basically how much
Like
people
sweat?
sweat. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because the
Yeah.
main idea is that when we have an emotion, you usually have a peak, and that
Mm.
peak arousal, we call it, the pores of the skin enlarge it, so you can actually measure the electricity that goes through it.
Mm.
Anyhow, but you can measure if there is a very quick difference in an emotional state. You don't know which emotion, but you know that, oh, there is a peak. But usually these things are very common with eye tracking because you can see where they're looking at, people are looking at. And I think it's very promising. A couple of things, like right now, eye tracking software are very expensive, but in the future, back in the day, like 6 years ago, I was working with a German company. I collaborated with a German company that were doing eye tracking on cameras, webcams.
Oh, wow.
But that they failed miserably, unfortunately,
Yeah.
because webcams were pretty bad, but
Mm.
right now, with AI, ironically, and with better webcams, integrated webcams, right? So you can use the integrated webcam of your browser to
Yeah.
have maybe not the precision level of a research grade eye tracker, but for
Hmm.
many things is good enough, you
Yeah.
know?
I think this is all
So
great because I feel as if SEOs and marketers should be trying to understand all this stuff that you're researching. And just because I'm thinking of it now, where I know people can see your research on Google Scholar, correct? Is there anywhere else you'd
correct.
point people to? I'm doing this in the middle of the conversation, but just because I think some people might want to go, where can I learn about this, right?
No, totally, totally. So Google Scholar is a great thing. If you Google Luca, Luca, and then my last name Cian. Yes. And by the
You have
way,
a
you
lot of
are
great.
one of the three people that I know that was able to pronounce my name correctly.
I hit
So that's great.
I hit the button. Well, as I tell you, it might be genetic. I'm half Italian, but I hit your little button on the Darden website where it says "Hear my
Okay.
name." That's a great feature. So
Perfect. Absolutely. Same thing in
yeah.
LinkedIn. So LinkedIn um, also is a great thing. If you follow me or other people who publish on AI, usually people publish there a lot of their research about AI. And then, although academics sometimes are not great on social media, but I would say LinkedIn and
Mhm.
is where people post the most, but sometimes also people post also on X, for example, right? So if you follow 2, 3 people that that work in academia and follow their work, sometimes they repost other stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
it
a way
means
to know it. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
you're great about reposting other people's things. I saw on LinkedIn. I do want to ask in one moment about the word and machine effect, but
Mm-hmm.
I need to ask for, I'm putting you on the spot here, but 2 or 3 recommendations of people. I'm trying to get outside the SEO bubble, as I mentioned, right? And my LinkedIn feed right now is atrocious. It is, I go in there and I just want to go vomit and quit marketing and never come back to it again. Who are 2 or 3 people that me and the audience could, look at or follow in LinkedIn or other places?
Absolutely. So one person, and it's not because I'm a fellow Italian, but is really good, is a person called Stefano Puntoni, Puntoni. He is a professor at Wharton in AI, and he does great stuff. Another fellow Italian, but again, not just because it's the last Italian that I mentioned, but it's one of my co-authors. Her name is Chiara, Chira Longoni, Longoni. And then otherwise, there are many other great American scholars. Like, for example, another co-author, a friend of mine, is Aaron Garvey. So AaronGarvey. He also does a lot of great stuff on AI. And those are some of the people, without creating us. And there are many, many, many more. Someone
That's
that
great.
probably will
Yeah.
get very offended because I didn't mention them. But these are the people that I work the most with. And so there are
Yeah.
people, another thing, absolutely, another great researcher that is, so right now, myself, another 3 professor are doing a special issue on a journal called Journal of the Association of Consumer Research on AI. So everything we will publish there will be on AI, etc., etc. And so
Awesome.
this will be also interesting, and
We'll
so
look for
all the
that.
other,
I'm going to
all the
start
people
cleansing.
working there would be top
Yeah.
notch. Yeah.
I'll start cleansing my feed after the interview. I want to talk about the word of machine effect. So you originally published a great article on HBR. Side note, not sure if I mentioned, but HBR is a site I've worked with for several years now, fellow Boston company. Although, as things go with publishers nowadays, the work's been much more minimal, but we did a lot of work with the editorial. I did a lot of work with the editorial team in 21, 22-ish. And I actually saw your article when it came out at the time.
Oh,
But revisiting it now, obviously through a new lens and being able to ask you about it. So I want you in a moment just to define word of machine effect, but also I pulled a great quote and you said, customers tend to trust artificial intelligence recommendations when the product is utilitarian, but resist it when they're choosing a product for pleasure or life experience. So what is word of machine effect? And does that quote still stand, or has it shifted? And let's just unpack what the meaning of that, the implications of that.
Yes, I think it still stands, but it may change in the next few years. And next few years, I don't know if it's 2 years or 10 years. That's something that, unfortunately, with this thing, we need to continue redo experiments because things can change pretty rapidly. But basically, so this study actually was born because of a student of mine came after an internship with a company that maybe I shouldn't mention, but one of these huge retailers that also has online presence, and they have an algorithm to provide recommendation for different products. And the students came to me and said, it was cool working there, but we had this struggle because we didn't understand. Sometimes people were following recommendation for some products, but not for others. Like, for example, they were following recommendation for a dishwasher or for a drill, but not for food. And we didn't understand why. And so there was the insight that we use at the beginning for our research. And we thought, there are many, instead of being binary, meaning trust AI versus not trust AI, probably trust sometimes and not sometimes. And so we thought one dimension we could explore is this utilitarian versus hedonic. What is utilitarian? Utilitarian are all those things that you buy means to an end, like buying a dishwasher, just to give the same, like a soap for the dishwasher, a soap for the washing machine, healthy food.
Are we talking all physical things, or are we also talking, would you consider software as utilitarian?
Absolutely. Software as utilitarian. If software is TurboTax is utilitarian.
Yep.
Software is my new AI girlfriend. That's not utilitarian. And so that's more hedonic. What is hedonic is something that you do to please your senses, something that you do not to reach a goal, but
Mm-hmm.
more because, so for example, I'm eating healthy most of the times, not because I really love eating a salad, but because I want to be healthy. So for a goal. And hedonic is I'm eating a good pizza because I really love pizza,
Yep.
Same thing drinking wine. You do because usually you like, or you signal something to the others, but you don't do, for a specific, I need, like it's not that you reach a goal if you drink wine,
Yeah. It's
selecting a
interesting.
vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people are still turning to social media and, contrary to word of machine, word of mouth for the experiential things. You want to go on a vacation, or you want to go to some event like music, or right. Are you still seeing that? It sounds like that people are not trusting AI as much for that. And is it a not trust AI, or is it just that I trust my human friend more? You
Oh,
know what I'm
that's
saying? There
interesting.
are relative.
Totally. It's exactly like that. We think AI is not competent. Most people, statistically speaking, think that AI is not competent in assessing hedonic things.
Like what I
In
want.
other words, AI is not great in thinking about food, vacations, things. That is not totally true, because actually AI can be very good in, reading 1,000 reviews and telling me what's the best
Mhm.
vacation. Probably better than my friend who, maybe have different taste than me. So it's not that is necessary. It's more a lay belief. And but a lay belief based on the fact that you think, machines are rational, so they should be good for things that are complex, utilitarian, while humans should be good for things that are more based on senses, etc., etc. But
That's interesting.
but we found that the effect disappears when there is, and this is general a lot of research, when there is a human in the loop. Like if you put a human somewhere in the process, then you get the best of both worlds. Like people say, oh my God, now I really like it because I assume, there is human for the hedonic, machine for the more utilitarian. And if you think about, sometimes you can fix sort of this effect by putting a human in the loop or by framing. Think about Netflix. Netflix is in the hedonic business, movies. You watch
Yeah.
movies for your pleasure, right? And indeed, their algorithm doesn't say our algorithm suggests the next movies.
Yep.
They said people like you also like they flip it. They say
Yeah.
you humans, other humans like it. It's an algorithm, but they frame it as human, right? So
Hmm.
if you think about it, you can also frame it like, if you frame it like this, then people focus more on, if other humans did it, then fine, they
Yeah, and
did
that
it.
gets to a question that I've been dying to ask, and this relates to how businesses can think about their AI strategy. If I'm wondering your opinion based upon your understanding of human psychology. If businesses, or even publishers, even more important than businesses, if they want to use AI assistively to create content, whether it's like write the first draft or edit it or in any part of that process,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think they should approach that process to increase its effectiveness and trust with the consumers? Like, do you think it should be disclosed? Like, what's the best way? Because I see a lot of companies like, we wrote all this blog content with ChatGPT, or, we're incorporating AI into our process of content marketing. Should that be disclosed, or what is the best way for companies to do this to earn trust or get results from that?
Fascinating questions. So
Yeah.
if you look at, if you we did a project on that, and if you also look, I remember a lot of articles online. If you ask people, should companies disclose if they use AI to write a blog post, an article, whatever, the overwhelmingly majority would say yes. People should disclose AI. Why? Because we all like transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in our research, we also showed that this is a paradox here. People want to know if an AI wrote something. At the same time, if you disclose that a piece was written in AI, these disclosure make people feel less trusting the company, so people trust less the article in general, and also find it less accurate. So if you write a real thing with AI,
Yeah.
people think it's not that real, and trust less. And so you could, and that's a paradox, because if you think about, you could say, oh my God, like I'm the New York Times or whatever, or I have a social media and I can publish 1,000 posts and I'm all in for transparency. So yes, this is written with AI, etc., etc. Then people start saying, oh, maybe this is not realistic. And also, why should I trust this person who uses AI, this company who uses AI? So that's a real problem,
Yeah.
because what's the solution? Not disclosure it? Well, then if you don't disclosure and then you discover it is true, it's even worse, right? So I think here, one potential solution, although we didn't test it, is some sort of clear disclosure, meaning, hey, an AI was used to do research, but then we verified everything. Like, tell people that there is a human in the loop, and the human uh, was able to override or
Oversight
to
on it.
have an oversight on the final results. So that's one important thing, because otherwise you risk that people don't trust you, and people find also, in the moment that it's generated by AI, people find it less creative, less
Mm-hmm.
real. So it's really interesting that
It's tricky because when you're primed to know that AI was involved, you have a bias. Like humans have a bias to not like it or not trust it as much. Another example is I had Spotify on, like, it was just playing random songs and a song came on and I was like, this is great. This is amazing. It was like some like Afro-Cuban thing or something. And uh I went and clicked in it and realized that it was entirely AI. I could just tell
oof,
based
okay,
upon the
totally.
name of the artist, and I went to find the artist and it didn't exist. And I'm like, oh man, I was just really enjoying this song that I now think is AI, and I like it less now.
Right, it's incredible. I think maybe this will change in the future, but in our research we find exactly like this. In the moment it's AI art, AI song written by AI, people think it's less creative, less accurate. And another thing I want to say that relates to something you said before, you did something on Claude and then you found that Claude was not great in writing something. Well, then we found this also a fact that is interesting in our research that we call algorithmic transference, meaning we found that one AI system fails, people generalize that failure to all similar AI systems.
Mm-hmm.
Give you an example. Back in the day, a few years ago, 2 years ago maybe, remember, was McDonald's, I think, that implemented an AI system to collect orders at the
Okay.
drive-in.
Yep.
And people made fun of it because this AI sometimes, very rarely, but made mistakes, probably less than humans at the drive-through McDonald's. But when an AI made a mistake, they recorded it. They went viral on TikTok, and
Yep.
so McDonald's had to suspend every drive-through AI system to collect orders. But that didn't damage only McDonald's. It damaged every other system that use AI to collect orders in drive-through.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we found is that when a person make a mistake, people think, okay, it's a human. If Luca makes a mistake, I don't think that every professor at University of Virginia is an idiot, right?
Yep.
But if look at the algorithm of the University of Virginia, Darden makes a mistake, then people say, okay, most probably every system created by UVA AI is wrong, and probably every other algorithmic system created by academic institution could be wrong. So people overgeneralize, and that we found that has also problems when so there are ways to fix it. You could say, hey, by the way, our system is very different from the one that failed. But if you don't do it, people tend to overgeneralize and say, oh, I saw that fail, probably yours will fail as well.
Yeah. My wife made an appointment at Volkswagen to get very basic car service, and she went there. She drove there and showed up, and they said, "We don't have room for you. Our AI misscheduled your appointment, and you need to come back." And we were like, "Are you kidding?" So that's another example. Like I just, I feel like two people, because I'm like trying to work with AI in my job, and then as a person, I sort of hate it. So it's
Right.
bit of a conundrum. I want to connect some dots for maybe SEOs. We've talked a lot about a lot of great stuff, the psychology for humans when it comes to AI, some business strategy. The SEO industry is really just focused on rushing to optimize sites to show up in LLMs. Everyone's trying to claim they know how to write a piece of content or optimize a website to have it show up in ChatGPT or Claude. And like I said, LinkedIn's a bit of a minefield these days, reading all the case studies that obviously don't make any sense. And none of it helps with the end consumer. So if you could speak to the SEO industry, as we're moving forward, trying to help businesses show up in these AI agents, LLMs, etc., but also, help the people that are searching, there's some things we can think about as an industry moving forward, whether it be philosophical or strategic or tactical. Because like I said, you're outside of that SEO bubble, but you do talk to CMOs and you do have contact with businesses. So what are you seeing as maybe an opportunity as we all move forward?
Well, that's such a good question. And I want to first tell you, once in one of these, I was in a conference with a lot of CMOs and business leaders, and there was a person there who told me this joke.
Yeah.
It's not mine, but I thought was fantastic. He
Yeah.
said, in our world, AI is like teenager sex, meaning everyone says they're doing it, but very
Yeah.
people actually are doing it, and who is doing it is very bad.
Yeah.
Meaning, everyone is trying to push on AI, but it's it's really hard there.
It's all 90% fluff.
All
Maybe
90% fluff.
Yeah.
And I think there are a few things that for sure all CEO are thinking right now. Of course, everyone is thinking how I can optimize for ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. And I think in the future we will have two ways. Because if you think about right now, we are optimized for human eyes, for human thinking. So I think in the future we'll have really two types of content. One content directed to human and one content directed to AI agents. And so you will have to optimize for both, not only for AI agents, because there will be still some human research, but I think for sure there will be two different optimization, one for human and one for AI agents. That's for sure something that I think of. And then another thing that is interesting right now is also to think who owns the data, right? So if you think about Walmart's partnership with OpenAI, the fact that you can be on OpenAI and say, hey, order me something, and you can just order it and it goes through Walmart. That's great because it opens up to a lot of people using ChatGPT, and everyone is using, or most people are using ChatGPT. At the same time, I think brands are becoming more a commodity at this point, right? Because if you do everything within ChatGPT, you lose data, you lose part of your journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, And maybe if you say, hey, ChatGPT, order me some paper towel, and they will do it. You don't even know where it's coming from, right? So
Yeah.
you lose data, you lose also brand power. So I think in the future, people will have to also think what part of the journey I want to own. I can collaborate with ChatGPT, etc., but I need to create. I need to take power in some part of the journey, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I would just compete on price or on raw um, performances that are two things that maybe some brands can compete on, but many times you don't, right? So when you have to compete on some more symbolic, emotional part, you want to own that part of the journey that is often not done in ChatGPT. Because if you think about, if you say, "Hey, ChatGPT, order some paper towel," do it, great. But if I'm a loyal customer of Nike, for example, I'm not asking ChatGPT which running shoes I should buy. I would
Yeah.
just buy a Nike, right? So
Mhm.
you can take people out from this loop of searching from ChatGPT, but that means creating good content, create even more is important, some sort of connection, loyalty, not these things people think, oh, are irrelevant. Well, I think for many brands are much more relevant now than before because if competing on price is always hard, if not difficult, competing
Yeah.
on mere reviews, again, very difficult. Also because in our research we found that different LLMs present different research results
Mhm.
from the same query. So if I say, hey, what is the best running shoe? Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude will present different brands, and so that's incredible because the data should be sort of, I'm not saying the same, but you think, oh well, there should be a lot of commonalities, and we found very little commonalities across brands. So I think that's very important for a brand to be able to distinguish itself from the
Yeah, I
future.
like that.
From
And I think one place I hope also things might be going is maybe companies being more value driven. So knowing what they stand for to connect to people with similar values, but two, knowing exactly who their customer is and what they want. So as I mentioned before we hit record, we're going hopefully to Tuscany in a couple of years to do some hiking. And we're using AI to research tour companies and what the best areas of Italy are and the best hikes and everything like that. And we're giving it, all of our preferences. Like we don't want super hot weather. We want this type of hiking. We don't want a lot of crowds. I love Italian espresso, so I want some of that. So we're giving it all of our preferences. And then in my mind, the LLM is acting as like a filter or like this highly personalized matchmaker that's going to find the perfect company or the perfect town in Italy for like what we want. Right. And so I think there's a question here, but it's number one, just an observation that I've had that I think companies will need to be very clear on exactly what they stand for and what they do, but who their customer is. And I'm wondering
100%.
if you see the same thing. Do you see that maybe because you said prices are raised to the bottom, everything's a commodity in ChatGPT. You often don't even know what the brand is that it's being returned back to you. So do you see a world, my optimistic view being that maybe things go a little more value driven again?
I honestly do. Again, trying to be optimistic, because one could say, there is no world in the future. AI will take over and then will kill us all. But if we want, if we want to be optimistic, no, I think, there will be a point like that. And that's why we go back, in my opinion, that one shouldn't optimize for algorithms, but more also for psychology, as you said, what is your core customer, understand it so well that you can speak to them and so have a brand that is value driven. And value driven doesn't necessarily mean uh, being having some sort of brand activism, but means that's very clear what we stand for. This is our core values. This is also investing on the emotions or what you want to provide, very clearly, because then I think in the future loyalty to a brand would be so important. And even more, imagine a future where for every search, maybe you go to ChatGPT or equivalents and they do everything, shopping for you and everything. At a certain point, people will get bored, will want to be uh, different. That's innate human experience. So people, if people are optimized for the same shoes, even if the brands are different, when you will find someone with completely different shoes, I'm using shoes as an example,
Yeah.
people will ask why, and they say, well, instead of asking ChatGPT, I found this little brand somewhere who's telling me, this story, and so you make yourself different by not using ChatGPT. So I think in a in a
Yeah.
in a future where everyone is using ChatGPT, brands can use not being on ChatGPT is for sort of, or being in ChatGPT, but sort of creating, we're not the top results. And so that's where you can be countercultural, you
Yeah.
can be
You go outside of
unique,
the system and yeah.
right? And that's
So
why, and that's the reason why that the bot cannot understand.
right. I'm going to ask a couple super quick questions. I want to ask if a series of things, if you think they're going to be around in 10 years. So we're just going to
Yeah.
go thing by thing and see what you think. So Google search, is it around in
Yeah.
10 years or
Yes.
okay, good. So that might imply the second one, just websites. You think websites will exist in 10 years as we know it?
Yes, one version for humans and one version for AI systems.
Okay. Now, did you see the recent report by Anthropic about the different jobs being potentially impacted? It was this great chart.
Yes.
You saw that?
Uh-huh.
Do you think so? It highlighted like business admin, accounting, a lot of desk jobs as being like 80 to 90% accounted for with AI. Do you think those jobs will still be around in 10 years?
That's a good
Tough
question.
one,
I
right?
think there will be probably less people doing those jobs and probably will look very different from what the
Mhm.
way they look right now.
Yeah. So what are we all going to do? We're not going to be on computers. We have to get some hobbies, learn a skill.
Right. Right. So I don't know. I do believe that sometimes, recently in the stock market there has been this SaaS apocalypse, like where all the
Yeah.
software is like, oh my god, will not exist anymore. So the stock of software companies were like crashing down because Anthropic will replace them all. I do believe that sometimes of course, if I am the CEO of Anthropics or any other this company, I need investors to believe in me. So my narrative will be AI will change all.
Yeah.
And I do believe that AI will have an impact in our life, a very enormous one, but I think there is a little bit overhyped that will destroy us all. I,
Yeah.
I, I if you think about, I always want to remind myself that when internet was not a thing or was just created, Google was not existing,
Hmm.
right? Google came after internet, and now is one of the biggest company in the world, giving a lot of jobs to thousands of people. And that could be also for AI, right? Maybe AI will create companies that right now they're not exist anymore, but they will exist in the future. Right now we are seeing only like before in our internet will replace this job, but we
Hmm.
don't know what other jobs can be created. So I think maybe some task will be automatized, but something more related to supervising strategy, creativity, entrepreneurship. Those will be jobs that maybe in the future will continue to exist. Also, as humans, we love human connection. So maybe yes, I will use AI for something, but I will still think that at a certain point I want to have a relationship with the seller.
Hmm.
If I really, if my livelihood depends of some providers, like for example, for some, if my dad was a small entrepreneur, and I remember he was telling me, at a certain point, some one of their other companies that were not, sometimes we're not able to arrive at the end of the month, and so they had to file bankruptcy, and so they had to decide who to pay and who not to pay. And he said that's why relationship is so important, because I want to be one of the people that they will pay in case they will file bankruptcy. And
Yeah.
so it's not, this is a boundary condition, very
Yeah.
extreme, but to say that in a world that everything will be ChatGPT or AI, I think human interaction will be important. So every job that will be human, that where humans are important, I think will still exist, because we will crave for that human connection. In my optimistic view, so there will be companies, there will be an ex-Google that we don't know yet, creating millions of jobs with AI. Will be a lot of jobs, human connection, where we sell human things,
Like
connections,
experiences.
relationships,
Reminds me
experiences.
of a question I meant to ask you. You had a great insight on a LinkedIn post. You said there was a parallel between leaf peeping and ski tourism. Do you remember that
All
post?
right.
Remember
Right.
what was that connection you were making, and then how does that connect to business strategy? You had a really great point in that LinkedIn post.
I think there was that the connection was about the fact that um, that post was about the fact that sometimes people have to understand what's the real um what's your, like, that post was about Virginia specifically, and because their business is about people coming there to see the leaves changing. And so the important thing is that we live in a land that, like, for example, Virginia has beautiful trees in the fall, and that's is not will not be able to be replaced by AI, right? So sometimes locations and being a reality, that an experience that cannot be easily replicated, is really your unique selling proposition, right? So
Right.
I cannot replicate seeing beautiful leaves. I need to go there and see them, right? Yes, I can see pictures of it. Is the same? No, because as human, I want to tell the experience, the journey to go there, right? So sometimes the place where we live is the biggest, and that was the post, like one of the
Yeah.
biggest business resources we have, because AI will never able to replicate it. You can have all the virtual reality in the world, but one thing is to go to Tuscany and maybe also
Yeah.
experience some rude Italians. One thing is to have well, a lot of lovely Italians, and then one thing is to have a virtual experience of Florence. So, will never be the same. As realistic, you will always. So I think yes, all these things will be more and more powerful, realistic, but deep down we will know that we crave, human companionship. And I recently saw a movie that was very interesting, where this guy was basically an actor that was called Renting Family, I think. It was basically in Japan, where there is actually a real business where you can be paid to be a friend part-time of someone,
Oh wow.
or because people are lonely, and so sometimes I want just someone to hug me or to chat with, and
Yeah.
sometimes I pay someone, a random one. And I think that could be sort of something could happen in the future, where everything is digitalized, everything is AI. I will pay experiences to be with other humans on something real. So, that could be something that even brands can use in their use. Like, I create an experience. There's no AI that can create a real experience for you.
Yeah. Well, I've thought that things are going to go experiential, and I think that if I'm a software company, I should start thinking about how do I create a physical experience beyond a conference, right? Like I think that's the common thing. But for example, I have a lot of vintage things here in my office. So can you recreate a vintage 1990s living room? Like I just think that would be so fun for some people like that, that's
Absolutely.
just
And just
this
to give you
idea.
give an
What's that?
example, just to give you another example, MasterCard, right? That is B2B, basically boring. I mean, sorry about that business, but if you think about their CMO is going really into experiences, providing specific sounds,
Oh, really?
having association, with restaurants that are
Mm.
only associated with MasterCard. Basically create all possible sensorial experiences, because he knows that if he wants to fight against Visa, the only thing they have, yes, is points, whatever, but that's more a bank thing, is creating sensory associations with the
That's
bank.
interesting. You're thinking about all the senses. So the sound, taste, can you invent a beverage if you're a software company? That's interesting. I got one last question, and then I also want you to tell people, like, if you want them to find you somewhere or follow you or anything. But I'm just curious, are there any AI tools that you use on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? Are you a user of AI?
I would be very worrisome if I weren't. But yes, I do. I try to explore and to play with everything coming out recently. Uh, every kind of AI software that I can get my hands on, I try. But on a daily, I use for sure. Claude to code or to for some tasks as well. And so Gemini, LLM, ChatGPT, sometimes I make them fight against
Yeah.
one each other, meaning, hey, Gemini told me that, what do you think about it, and
Funny.
and that I use for sure.
Are there any,
I
like, newer or lesser known ones that come to mind that you've tried recently?
No, we sometimes in a lab we create some, open, like some sort of very limited version of these LMs, but I think it's a very close fight because they require power
Mm,
to create an LLM is incredible. Like the amount of money you have to have is incredible, right? So it's very difficult to be in this business. So that's why I think right now it's very hard. China tried with DeepSeek, that in theory
oh,
was okay in terms of results, but also was much cheaper to create. But again, was like still millions of dollars, right?
yeah.
So many, many millions, and probably who knows if that's what they say they use was the reality, right? So not in terms of billions, but millions. But yeah, I think is for the big LLMs that's a difficult race. But other than that, I right now I'm trying to understand. What I'm fascinating is um to understand, there are software to recognize if something is written by AI, right? But also
Hmm.
there are software that I'm using that are trying to naturalize AI languages. So you write something on AI, say on ChatGPT, and then you put in this software, and there are few software, smaller software do it, and they try to make it more human sounding,
Mm,
so that if you put it in another software that try to detect if a text was written by AI, it will not pass. So I play a
yeah.
lot with them to see how they fight each other. I think it's very interesting because no one disclose it, but how an AI thinks AI right, and how an AI thinks a human rights,
Mm,
in order
interesting.
to, they call it AI naturalizers. So when you write something, use this software to naturalize what an AI wrote to make it seem more human. And so I'm really curious right now
Yeah.
to understand what will be that, and maybe in the future, is a race, right? So in the future,
Oh,
what will happen, if
yeah.
yeah.
That's fascinating. I gotta play around with that. So, it's been great chatting with you. Where do you want to direct people? Do you want them to follow you? Do you want them to read a paper of yours? Like, this is your chance for any, call to action here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. If everyone is interested to learn more about me, again, you can just Google me at Luca, at Google my name, Luca, and then last name Cian, Cian. Write me at Luca, Luca, at virginia.edu. So very simple email and then follow me on LinkedIn. because that's where I post the most, and that's my social media of choice.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks everyone for Luca. You were the first episode of my reboot. I did 10 years. I'm calling my first 10 years season 1. And this is now season 2. So
This has been
I've
an
got
honor.
many other guests lined up, but you were the first on the schedule here. So I appreciate you joining us on episode 1 of season 2 of Experts on the Wire. And we will talk to you all next time.